Jim, there's a lot of ways you could tell stories, and you have chosen the written word to be the way that you tell stories. Um, why the written word, and when did you know that words were going to be how you made your way in the world?
Uh, I had no idea for most of my life that so far that I was going to have a career writing stories and using the written word. I think when I go back, I think in first grade I lied a lot. So that was the beginning of my storytelling career. And then I think, I began the ability to tell dad jokes and terrible puns, probably at a point before I was even capable of becoming a father. So it seems like I was always playful with my words. I was always trying to do something with them or trying to impress with them or something like that. And I started out writing copy in advertising and at a bunch of like agencies and advertising agencies in Wisconsin and wrote ads for everything from teat dip, which is what you rub on a cow's udders before you milk them, to coho salmon fishing tournaments to batteries for hearing aids and on before I was able to link that career with another childhood love, and that was comic books. And
And,
after maybe
and
my first year in the industry, I found myself in New York working for Marvel, writing ads for them.
And Jim, what did you learn about writing for Marvel Comics in the world of writing about cow udders and fishing tournaments?
I don't think there was anything about cow udders or fishing tournaments um, with the that directly applies to Marvel Comics, with the exception that as a writer, often our job is to take something that seems unexciting and make it exciting.
Wow, that's yeah, well said. Um,
So, for example, Spider-Man has fought Dr. Octopus over 100 times. And so the ad will come to me and I have to make it seem like this is the ultimate battle until the next ultimate battle after that. Or I remember an editor who was writing Captain America, and Captain America had been dying for 2 years. And and he came down to me and he said, "Okay, so this is really the death of Captain America." I was like, "So you want us to do the ad we've done for the last 2 years and to say, but this time we mean it?" And he was like, "Yeah." It was like that.
well, Jim, you have written for every major comic franchise I can think of. You've put your words in the mouths of every superhero in comic legend that I can think of. What is the difference for putting stories together with for Batman or Luke Skywalker or Spider-Man, as opposed to when you've created your own work like The High Cost of Happily Ever After? How do you approach writing the work that has originated in someone else's mind versus work that you completely have created on your own?
Well, I have this list and I've never like fully compiled it, but over the years of writing, I've kind of gotten these rules, which are of course guidelines because as writers we're always trying to break the rules, but there are these guidelines. And so when I'm working with an established character or an established IP, there are two things that I have to do every time. And this doesn't come from me. This is not even stolen. It was a gift by from director Sam Raimi himself, who was comparing comic books to TV to film franchises to all that. And he said, the first thing you need to do is you have to advance the chapter. You have to advance the story every time you step back into this ongoing story of chapters and whatever. You advance the story. But secondly, the second rule of this is you have to remind people why they love this character and the story in the first place. And that always helped me judge. So when I'm writing Spider-Man or Batman or Superman, I want to say something new always. I want to add something we haven't seen before, but it's also got to be so true that people read it and they say, "Wow, that's a Superman story. That couldn't have been a Batman story because it was Superman." And all the ethos and all the Americana and all the sense of goodness that you would give to Superman has to be there, or we almost reject it as a reader or a watcher or a listener. We reject it if it's not true to the character. I think that's why, things like Star Wars gets so much, such a response. Um, some people really want to see it go in different directions, but those tried and true followers, they're just like, no, that wasn't a Star Wars story, or that was a Star Wars story.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I've heard that Disney World has gotten rid of Kylo Ren at the park. It's like no one wants to pose with the guy who killed Han Solo.
Wow.
And it's all gone Mandalorian since, because Mandalorian has been embraced as that thing that's truly of Star Wars.
Wow.
And that's really interesting. So your question in regards to that, of like when I'm dealing with IP, or I'm dealing with getting to tell a story in a set universe versus an original universe. In an original universe, instead of dealing with the rules of a character or rules of the of an established world, it's almost like I'm dealing with the rules of a specific genre and then trying to bend them. So in the high cost of Happily Ever After, which is still one of the favorite things I've ever written, and I'm so proud of it always, and of my relationship with the publisher, of course. Um, you know, it was like, okay, what is a fairy tale story? And then how do I do that differently? How do I do a schmaltzy love story that's true to my want to begin a story in darkness and move to light and all that sort of thing. So in that case, I said, okay, let's do the story of the heroic journey of the damsel in distress. What happens when she's waiting for a prince to come to save her, but he's not going to come? And it falls upon her to be the hero that saves herself.
Mm.
And while they're, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, please continue.
And I said, in the end, while there are aspects of that happen or not, it was enough just to raise the question: what does the damsel in distress do? Is she's being broken down and starved and psychologically manipulated and really even driven crazy in the midst of the story with her own romantic ideas and her own desires and hopes.
Jim, what does your writing process look like? Or when are given an assignment to either write, the latest, Spider-Man or Avengers, or when are creating something your own, what does your writing process look like? Are you someone that outlines extensively? Do you just dive in? Are you a morning writer, an evening writer? What does it look like?
It really depends on how afraid I am of the deadline. It really depends on who's breathing down my neck, and all that sort of thing. But really, I make sure I do three things every day. I have to read something, I have to watch something, and I have to write something. And so some days I may write for 4 or 5 hours and only watch something for a half hour and read something for another 15 minutes. Other days I may watch something for 4 or 5 hours if it's like a Zack Snyder Justice League thing. and then, read something else and then hardly write at all and feel like, oh man, I got to write a lot tomorrow. So there's a lot of freedom that goes back and forth in that, and there's a lot of possibility in it. But at the same time, those are my three things. I'm not a set morning writer. I'm not a set evening writer. I'm more of a, what time does my schedule allow to write?
Mm,
And that's what I do, you know. But I do make sure I do those three things every day.
mm. Jim, you're someone who has been fortunate enough in the world of comics to write both in the MCU, the Marvel universe, as well as the DC universe. Um, how do you approach writing in those universes differently? How do you put on your Marvel hat versus putting on your DC hat? What's the mentality, the psychology of approaching those?
Well, because in each case, you're trying to find the humanity of the characters and speak to that. Um, the Marvel universe was always built on this idea that you have flawed people being given like amazing or extraordinary powers. So with that, you speak to the flaws and you write to the flaws in them and how they doubt the powers they use and deal with the fact that these are to a real extent normal human beings um, dealing with problems that arise by being given power. In the DC universe, it's a little different because DC's it's almost the superheroes from Superman to the Flash to Wonder Woman to Batman. It's almost like it's a Greek mythology born again in our day and age. And in that case, you these characters are like modern gods. And so their humanity is lacking. And so the only way for them to seem human or for us to relate to them on some kind of human level is to make them suffer, which I do.
Jim, of all the famous characters that you got to tell stories with and to put words in their mouth, is there a favorite? Has there been one character that you've enjoyed perhaps the most to tell stories about?
Um, I have lots that I really like to write about. I just wrote a prequel to Earth X in which I got to really embrace kind of the friendship between Spider-Man and Daredevil. And we've never seen Daredevil as quite the leader that we get to see him in this series. And I somehow connect to Spider-Man, and I have a lot of fun writing Spider-Man. I think it's like I understand what it was like for him to be this nerdy kid who had funny things to say but was too afraid to say them. And so once he put on the suit, he could be funny again. It gave him the freedom to step out of that and kind of the sense of responsibility he had even before he was given power and all that. Like I like that. Um, I love writing Superman, and I never thought I did. The first comic book I was ever given was a Superman comic, and I was so pissed off that my brother was given a Batman comic. It seems so wrong. But as time goes on, I'm kind of like, oh, I feel like I get Superman so well. I understand this character so well, and I know how to deal with him and what to do with him. I wrote a Superman story a couple years ago about like way far off in some other galaxy, a Green Lantern, an alien Green Lantern, finds out that there's one last Kryptonian that still lives, and that's Superman. And this Green Lantern's been lost for years and years, and he uses the ring to bring him to Earth. And he comes here and he says to Superman, "I want you to kill me in the name of justice and mercy. You have to kill me. I'm responsible for the death of billions." And Superman's like, "Well, I don't kill." But again, that justice and mercy thing, those are things associated with Superman. So going back to my Sam Raimi rule, It's like, what makes a Superman story? Superman doesn't kill, you know, all that sort of thing. But then the Green Lantern confesses that he was the Green Lantern in charge of protecting Krypton, and Krypton blew up. It ended, and it's all his fault. And so this is a Green Lantern filled with guilt and dismay. And again, he wants Superman to kill him because that's justice, the third element of the Superman story. So, and it turned out so well, and the story ended so well, and it was like lots of fun. And I have other Superman things I want to do, but yeah, Superman. Love writing Superman, and you know, again, that goes back to the he's a god, so the only way to show his humanity is to make him suffer. But that's hard to do unless you find real emotional things to tie it to, because kryptonite just isn't enough.
You have had the opportunity to work with all of the biggest named artists, you know, that put visuals to your words. Um, you know, people like Alex Ross. How do you work with artists, Jim? How do you kind of figure out that relationship when you are a writer who writes in this medium? How do you work with someone who is going to be putting visuals to that? And you know, how do you navigate those waters?
Well, it's really interesting because when you think about even writing graphic novels, it's not like writing a screenplay for a director. Oftentimes, the writer, if they get a chance to meet with the director, it's on set or something like that. Their job is already completely done. They don't know who's going to direct it unless they're directing it themselves or they're working with a buddy. In most cases, you know, that's a very like writing and directing is separate. But in comics, in the graphic novel world, it's almost like you're co-directing with your artist. Like you could put notes in your script that say, please put a phone in this panel because it's going to ring 3 panels from now, and we need to establish. You can put references. Here's a website to look up. Here's a picture of what I had in mind. This should be similar. Like there's this almost this conversation in the scripts to an artist. So I would say 75% to 80% of the time know the artist I'm going to work with, and I familiarize myself with what they do and who they are, and if I don't know them already, and I get to know what they draw best and what they like to draw best, and hopefully there's even a couple conversations with them so I can say, hey, I love what you did here. Let's do this here. If you want to do something like that, what do you like to draw best? What would you like to do? Blah, 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 and get a sense of who they are. So it's even more collaborative. It's even less of an assembly line kind of approach where you finish your thing and then goes off to the next. It's really like you have to become buddies or friends with this person and put your pride in the final product, because you know that whatever I'm saying, they're going to bring their own thing and it's going to be something else. So it's like, you know, if you get to work with Steven Spielberg, it's not going to be shot just in one room. You're going to want those giant vistas. You're going to want kids. You're going to want, you know, all the things that make a Steven Spielberg movie in there. And so graphic novels are it's really about working with people again and having an eye for what makes them special, so I can even write towards that.
Well, Jim, you are someone who has long made a living with your writing. What advice would you have? What would you say to writers who are trying to break in the business, writers that are young writers trying to get their start? What advice can you offer writers trying to get where you are?
Well, I would say first of all, you know, you got to just keep on doing it. It's easy to quit. It's easy. It's been so easy for me, rather than write something every day, read something every day, watch something every day, just to read and watch something every day. Like that's the easy part. Like that's the lazy part. So you just have to do it. The other thing I would say is so important is find people who give you great critiques. Like, you know, my rule of thumb is if someone gives me a note on something and it's what they would do, I'm just very grateful and I say, oh, thanks. I'm going to think about that. But and then I'm going to ignore it completely because they're telling me the story they would write if they were a writer. Um, but on the other side, if someone understands the story I'm trying to tell and then gives me a note, that's that's gold. Like I think for the writer, we go through this process of learning in which, like at the beginning, if someone doesn't get what we do, we're so hurt. We're so like it's an attack on our pride, and somehow in the process, and the sooner we do this, the better. We have to shift our pride into the final thing we're writing, like so that a critique becomes the way of making that thing better, and we're not as hurt.
Jim, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. This was amazing.
Oh yeah, so easy. Thank you.